In a small town we're free.
This is the Patriots Prayer.
This is Bryson Gray, and you are watching the Patriots Prayer.
On the Patriots Prayer Network. Thank you all.
Can the chains that try to bound? Out on the fields where hard work's done, they fight the fight till the work's well won. No more silence in the heartland's call. Stand up strong, let the weak ones fall. The detox starts with Eddie and Nate, battling lies, exposing hate. Woke ideologies crumble and fade when real men step into the parade. Clear eyes and an iron will, they take on tides that others fear still. Voices of the field, the farm, the street. Two men stand and won't accept defeat. Against the storm of cancel waves, they light the fire, legends and braves. In a world trying to dim the flame, they keep it burning, they make a name. The detox starts with Eddie and Nate, battling lies, exposing hate. Woke ideologies crumble and fade when real men step into the parade.
Nate, how are you, sir?
I am doing great. It's good to be here with you. Man, there's
right.
so much stuff going on that I
You
think
fit it all in the title.
yeah, we're gonna have a stacked show tonight.
So I wanted to start with the pop culture story, if you didn't mind. Here's I got all these clips here, and I hope I play the right one because I did a terrible job at labeling them, but I believe this is the one. Here. Here we go already. Give me a second. This is it. Nope, not it either. Oh, no, that is it. The sound on that is terrible, though. But as you can see the headline there, I'm going to pull this down. Jay-Z is now accused of raping a 13-year-old girl. More people are falling into this Diddy thing and this Diddy list, as people are calling it, as they're comparing it to the Epstein list. And the music industry as a whole, this guy had a big portion of it under his control. At one point in time in the 90s, there were some contentions between what people turned into an East Coast versus West Coast thing, and it was all about rap music, a Tupac, Biggie thing. And out of that, this guy, Puff Daddy or Sean Combs, kind of rose to power as the face of the East Coast. He was that guy. Found out that the FBI was investigating him for quite some time, even at the time of Chris Wallace's murder, and never arrested him for a long period of time. But people have known about these infamous parties for a very long time. A lot of celebrities attended these parties, and this accusation is that a 13-year-old girl was brought to this party, made to sign an NDA, which is illegal anyway. She's a minor. She can't sign a legal contract.
That's right.
And then she's forced into this, sexual excursion between Jay-Z and Puff Daddy. Now, that's the story. I'm not claiming that it's true or no one's been tried and convicted yet. We don't know all the facts. But it just doesn't look good for any of the people involved, because as we were talking before we came on, a lot of these people are now coming out of the woodwork willing to talk about it, when no one was willing to talk about it before. Lady Gaga is now crying in interviews, talking about what was done to her. But I mean, that happened years ago. Why didn't you say anything until now? It's very unbelievable that all these supposed gangster rappers and big time activists with these platforms were completely quiet, and now all of a sudden they're talking.
Well, most of those people, I think they had a lot to lose financially. And because this is a club. Who was it? George Carlin that said it's a big club and we're not in it. And I think it involves clearly it involves the Democrat Party. Look at who had Jay-Z and look at who had P. Diddy and all these people endorsing them, and pretty much everybody that's been name dropped in this thing. They're all supporters of Kamala Harris. They were all supporters of Biden. They were all supporters of Obama. It goes back to the Clintons. So I think that these super rich, powerful elites, that's really what they are, Hollywood elites in this case, they're no different than the big tech moguls and and world leader elites that were on Epstein Island. These are people that think they can do whatever they want. They think they can get away with it because so far they have. And the problem is there's a new sheriff in town, and his name is Donald J. Trump. And so,
you think that's why they're cleaning house, though? Because it is kind of curious. The timing is curious. It could be the left cleaning up their own trash before they're able to be implicated.
well, let's see how many of these people end up, slipping on a razor or something, and or having an accident or
Sure.
peacefully falling asleep and not waking up. Honestly, that's what I'm curious to see, because then we'll start to begin to see the bigger picture. But this time around, there's some things that are different, right? During Trump's first presidency, we now know that the attorney general that everybody thought was this great guy turned out to not be such a great guy, and I think Bill Barr he should be questioned about Epstein died in a prison that was under it was a maximum security situation. Bill Barr was directly involved in that whole situation, and there were no answers that came out of anything. So I
For
think
those of you who don't know, go ahead. I'm sorry.
well, I just think that I think that it's going to be a different situation this time around. So it could be that they're trying to get a jump on things because they thought if Trump gets in there, then it's going to be a
They're
different
next.
Justice Department, and that's a possibility. But honestly, I think that you can only hide this stuff for so long. Eventually, it will come out.
Somebody's going to talk. But here's the thing. I have been in the hole in a level 4 facility, which is maximum security, level 4. And I know for a fact how it works. The guards walk every 2 hours. And it is mandatory that all of the cameras in a maximum security prison are on consistently.
That's right.
And you typically, while you're in a maximum security cell, you're not celled up with another individual. You're in the cell by yourself for the most every time, except for in very few cases. In Epstein's case, he was actually put in the cell with a pretty crazy individual that was his cellmate for a while. Then they got into a fight, and then they moved them off into his own cell. And they already tried once before. They said he attempted suicide and failed at the attempt.
Right.
While he had the cellie. Right. So what I think happened here was the cellie attempted to kill him, did not finish the job, and maybe cameras were on, things were done in such a way as they had to do something, they had to react, and then later on they perfected their plan and finally suicided him the way that they did. And surprised that Ghislaine Maxwell is still
the case surrounding Epstein Island and surrounding Jeffrey Epstein's death, right? Let's see, you had a removal from suicide watch, right? So that was one of the suspicious circumstances. You had a failure to assign a cellmate. Standard protocol required Epstein to have a cellmate, especially given his recent suicide attempt. There were lapses in monitoring, right? Correctional officers
they were asleep.
Yep, they were mandated to check in every 30 minutes, and they didn't. You had malfunctioning surveillance cameras. You know, you had a removal of Epstein's body. After his body was found, they removed it, from his cell before a thorough forensic examination could be conducted, violating Bureau of Prisons protocol.
The records were tampered with too, right? As
That's
far as
right.
I understand.
Well, the autopsy findings, the autopsy concluded that he died by suicide via hanging. However, Dr. Michael Baden, a forensic pathologist hired by Epstein's brother, suggested that the injuries were more consistent with homicidal strangulation. And then you had Epstein's alleged, connections, right? All the people he was connected with that likely were going to get exposed. Call me a conspiracy theorist. When you have that many things going on, I'm just going to call, the kettle black. The guy, he didn't kill himself. He was murdered.
No,
And then the fact that you can add on top of all of that, just surrounding the whole Epstein Island case, why are the names still not released? So I don't think we're going to see any of that released until Trump's in there. And then I expect that we will start to see this stuff getting released, because I think we're going to find a lot of interesting names that are on these lists of people. And it doesn't necessarily mean that, they did anything.
We do know some of the names.
We know some of the names. Bill
Tom
Gates.
Hanks, Bill Gates.
Yep.
The owner of Victoria's Secret, Prince Andrew.
Yep.
Clinton, obviously Bill Clinton with 26 scripts, Hillary Clinton, Huma Abedin.
Yes.
There's an extremely.
I don't know. Was her pervert husband on the list too?
I did not see any of the lists that ever came out that were confirmed to have Anthony Weiner's name on any of them.
Boy, what a name, man! If a name could tell you about who you are, boy.
Yeah, you remember how Jesus named Peter Petra for the he'd be the rock, so his parents knew something.
Apparently,
knew something, and then come to find out. I mean, just to go down that rabbit hole just for a second, Huma Abedin. Connected to, some pretty wild Middle Eastern characters, to even be allowed to work in politics in the United States is wild. And to be the assistant to Hillary Clinton on top of it, the Palestinian connections. And to be that close to the Clintons, it's pretty crazy. And then you got even crazier ties when you talk about the Soros family marrying into the Clinton family. Yeah. And marrying into John Kerry's family.
Well, and what bothers me about the whole case surrounding that was the fact that
Oprah, sorry about that. Yes, you're right. Oprah, exactly.
Oprah,
Tom Peter's daughter. Yep, Oprah was on that list.
Do you remember there was video that somebody had taken of the FBI breaching a window of the security building there, and they took the computers and they took the surveillance equipment or the surveillance tapes from Epstein Island, and then the FBI, basically would not publicly confirm their recovery of any computers or surveillance footage on Little St. James Island. Do you remember that?
No, but it doesn't surprise me. There are 168 missing from the Pentagon 9/11 tapes, 168 tapes, gas station tapes, hotel tapes, all that seem to, malfunction. 168 tapes malfunction altogether, 5 frames.
So I would expect that we, if Biden had won the election, I would expect that we would have, basically a replay of Epstein Island in relation to, this P. Diddy thing. But I don't think they're going to be able to get away with it this time. Number one, we're going to have a different Justice Department. I do think that eventually, I think while there's jurisdiction within Los Angeles, in that area, I think that you're going to have the feds involved, because, if they trafficked any of these girls from other places, which it sounds like they did, now you're talking about federal crimes.
Yeah, just don't have a lot of faith in the Federal Bureau of Investigation to actually carry out a legitimate.
Here's the thing. If the FBI pulled a case like this into DC, I would have no faith in them, because that's what they do.
It's your wheelhouse. I mean, is it
one
really
of one of the things that one of the things that I know about the Bureau is the field offices, when they conduct investigations, they do tend to do a pretty good job of investigating without involving politics. What has happened in the past, and really this is one of the things that changed under Comey and continued under Wray, is that the FBI became politicized to the point where they began. Actually, I take it back. It goes before Comey. The first person to start doing this was actually Robert Mueller, where they started pulling in high-profile cases into Washington, D.C., and literally taking it away from the field office. That's done entirely for political reasons. And so I think that what we're seeing is, with the new Trump administration and who he's decided to put in there, and I really do hope that Cash will get confirmed. I think we're going to see major cleanup of the FBI. I think it's going to go back to the way that things were done before, where you had a very compartmentalized FBI, and DC was not as involved with cases that were being run. And that's really what needs to happen, because it needs to be run out of the local field offices. And I think what we would see, if that comes to fruition here, then we should see some justice actually happen, maybe even on some of these other cases. Because the one thing that's interesting is that there are several cases, obviously, that under federal law have statute of limitations. But it doesn't have statute of limitations?
Murder.
Child trafficking.
Oh yeah,
That does not have statute of limitations.
Carries a life sentence in Florida.
And the other
carries a death sentence, doesn't it?
Yeah, yep.
He actually changed his state law down there. DeSantis did. So if you hurt a child under, I think, what is the age of like 12 or something like that, it's a death penalty.
Yeah.
I think that should be around the. I don't see any reason why that shouldn't be the law of the land.
Kidnapping used to be a capital crime. Used to be. That changed under Obama.
Really?
Yeah.
He actually changed a law that lowered the offense.
Well, it used to be if you were involved in kidnapping, yeah, it carried a capital crime, so you get the death penalty for kidnapping. I think they changed it because of all of the trafficking that has been happening, with children all over the place. You can still get the death penalty if a child's murdered, but yeah, it's just pure old fashioned kidnapping is no longer a capital offense.
Now in Nevada, they actually changed the way in which they can apply the kidnapping law, and that can be just for me grabbing your cell phone.
Now, I'll tell you, here's the thing. Here's the thing. These are I just pulled up a list of federal crimes that have no statute of limitations, and this is important. Murder, obviously, terrorism resulting in death, espionage, genocide, sexual abuse of a minor has no, there's absolutely no statute of limitations on it. Child pornography has no statute of limitation. Trafficking of children has no statute of limitation. Those three things right there, are involved in the whole PD, the whole P. Diddy thing, and Epstein Island for that matter. Acts of terrorism have no statute of limitations.
And Hunter Biden too.
That's right. That's right. Although it doesn't matter since he got a blanket, forgiveness from his father. So they'll have to go after Hunter with state statutes.
Do you know that, and I didn't know this until today, but he gave him a blanket pardon, not just from now backwards for 10 years, but it has an expiration date of future.
Yeah.
He's got a future expiration date, like hurry up and finish conducting said business, illegal business, by this date. And then you're good to go. You're not pardoning, you're not giving anyone a blanket pardon for 10 years unless they're a career criminal, and you know it. Why would you set the duration? Usually a pardon is, you're pardoned. Look, Roger Clinton was pardoned by Bill Clinton, his brother, but we know a lot of that had to do with the fact that Bill Clinton was the actual one who committed those crimes alongside of Roger Clinton, the cocaine trafficking and that sort of thing. So we knew that was going to happen. But this is something that's unprecedented. It's never happened before in history. And you got people like the guys on The View that are acting like he's vindicated for allowing his son to be a career criminal and a pervert.
Yeah.
I mean, some of those pictures and things that he did with she was 14 years old, his niece. I mean, I just can't justify it. I mean, are we that sick? Are we that, also, are we that politically polarized that right and left mean more than right and wrong to that extent? Can we not even agree on what's absolutely detestable anymore, depending on what party you're in?
Well, I think we've known for a long time that the Democrats speak out of both sides of their mouth. Let's not forget, somebody did a really great video putting together all these Democrats saying that no one is above the law, and of course they were referencing Donald Trump. You don't hear any of them saying that now. So
Yeah, so Tom P's daughter said, "Are you prepared spiritually for the details of the victims?" I imagine it's horrific. They have been there have been law enforcement officers that have committed suicide from what they saw as far as the victims. Yeah, and that's true. That's true. So we need to be spiritually strong at heart and faith and resolve by releasing the files. We're also releasing Pandora's box, and that's very, very true. It is Pandora's box because one thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. It will cause a chain reaction of a sequence of events, and we've seen this in our government. I was just talking today with Judith Berry Baker about the JFK assassination, and it's no different from that than it is with this stuff. If they start unraveling those knots and letting the truth out, I mean, one thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. I mean, how many people in our government at this point are that corrupt? I would imagine. I'm just curious what you think, but if we were to go actually investigate and had an actually upstanding, law-abiding, just good guys out there investigating our investigators, how many of them do you think could stand up to that scrutiny within the intelligence community and the FBI and the State Department?
look, I think I'm going to share something that I know I've talked about before, but I don't really talk about it a lot in interviews that I've given on my whistleblowing. But what initially caused me to look into things, what caused me to go digging around and searching through FBI files, was a conversation that I overheard in where my government, boss, I guess you could say, supervisor, confided in me that he had seen discussions that had gone on and that had been transcribed from an inner, FBI communication system that we used.
Right,
And
I think you detailed
yeah,
that
and
part. It
in the discussion,
records everything that's in the
yeah,
bill. Yeah.
yeah. So in the discussion, in those transcripts, it said words like treason were being thrown around. They were saying that they were going to cover up Hillary Clinton's crimes because because they thought she was going to become president and they were worried about retribution. But another thing that was said that didn't line up with the documents that I found was that they said this was so big that they had discovered something so big it could bring down the entire US government. Now, what could be so big that it could bring down the entire US government? Certainly it wasn't the stuff that Hillary Clinton was doing, because that was bad, but it really only involved her and a few of her cronies. What could be
Well,
so
and
big?
we're talking about the Benghazi incident.
Well, even that, the entire government, they were talking like there was something that affected both sides, the Democrats and the Republicans. My guess is they stumbled across blackmail and extortion and things like that. I think they discovered something much bigger in either in the Hillary Clinton emails. They claim that they didn't have them. They had them. Guarantee you, NSA had them. I know that. They have everything.
Well, I think
So
that what Snowden released as far as how they collect data and what we know now, I mean, even there are some things that I can't talk about because of the job that I do and the
mhm.
people, but I know for a fact that some data centers, and I'll keep them nameless, are very close with the government.
Yeah.
And I know for a fact because I'm at the buildings. I see the guards with the M16. You have to be
Look,
badged to go in.
these guys, I'm just saying that I think in terms of what we're going to likely find out, and this will be it'll be interesting to see if Cash gets in there. Cash has talked about a lot of things that he knows are
If
going
Cash
on.
gets in there, do you think that
What's that?
there's an you see keep saying if Cash gets in?
Look,
Are you skeptical of his affirmation? Or are you
I believe that he will get in there, but I do think that there's gonna be a fight. I think that the thing that's gonna be hard for them is that they don't get any dirt on him. As far as I know, he's clean. He's kind of like me. When you've had a clearance for 27 years, basically since I was a teenager. Yeah, I didn't have time to get dirty. I didn't have time to make a whole lot of mistakes. I wasn't going to college, getting drunk, having parties. It was just not. And I'm sure Cash has probably got a similar lifestyle in that sense. And so that said, I think it's going to be hard to find anything on him. Yeah, and as Truthful Troll is saying, he's got a poly already. He's already passed a polygraph. So so I don't think there, so
he
I
said
think
access
it's
to
gonna be
all the
hard for us.
9/11 files and JFK files and all that? He did that interview with Glenn
Right.
Beck where
Now, he did say there was something interesting that he said though in that interview, and I was very I thought it very, very interesting. He made a comment that that like the JFK files, that the few things that haven't been declassified, he said those are things that have nothing to do with anything that anybody could imagine. In other words, it's the stuff that he said he could not talk about, but it's stuff that, like, the reasons that people think that certain things are still being classified have nothing to do with anything that people think are the reasons that it's classified for. I thought that was an interesting statement because what is it that, like, I mean, you think about it, right? They've declassified a lot of the information about the fact that Lee Harvey Oswald was a CIA asset. That has finally been declassified. In fact, I did a show talking about that, going through that document that has basically the first declassification run. Everything was so redacted you couldn't really tell what was going on. But then they unredacted a bunch of stuff, and the very last document that they unredacted pretty much reveals a lot that had not ever been revealed before, confirming certain things about Lee Harvey Oswald.
Let's show the people that interview. I actually
never believed that the CIA killed Kennedy.
No. You're talking to a guy that's read the entire JFK file.
You've seen all the secret stuff?
I've seen all of that, and I've seen the 7 pages of the 9/11 report. I've seen it all.
You don't say that to people that you can't tell what you saw. Should the Kennedy stuff be released?
Yes.
Is there anything there that is like, is anybody alive?
The problem is the things that we can't release have nothing to do with the questions you guys are asking. That's about as far as I can go on it. But like the answers you guys want, pretty much have them. There's very minimal stuff that can't be seen for things that you wouldn't even think are related to that.
Why can't we release them?
And you're thinking temporally, like, did it stop back then? Right? The way intelligence works is you're always developing it. Where did I get that? Where did that go? Oh, hey, I found that guy 5 years ago. Let's go talk to him. Where does that get us? It's a little bit bigger of a jigsaw puzzle. I mean, it's the same. Look, so the 7 pages of the 9/11 report, yes, overnight, that needs to come out. I'm telling you, that's got to go.
That will be very interesting.
There will be some people that are pissed off.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So what I'm guessing is that some of the things that he's talking about that can't still be released might be sources and methods, maybe not so much sources, but maybe methods on how we found certain things out. Or it could be things that reveal certain tactics that we still use today.
Well, we were just talking about it. If they in this investigation found people that they could use as a result of the investigation that they had compromised, and that led to them creating these consortiums so that they can trade intelligence. If those people get outed, then they lose their assets and they lose this intelligence that they built.
Or maybe the means of how they compromise people. If that tactic is still in use, say an Epstein Island type of thing, right? If they're still using those things, they can't reveal that. They can't reveal that that is a government operation, right? Because they're still using it. So I don't know.
Part about these types of things is that they can be government operations. If I'm being completely honest, we used to have certain rules in general.
Who says it's the U.S.? Who says it's the U.S. government? You know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah. I mean, now look, we are paying off mercenary groups to operate outside of the laws that we can operate under. Look what we did in Iraq with Blackwater and.
Look at Afghanistan. Look at Pakistan. We were interrogating people in Pakistan that, some of the things that got released, I think through WikiLeaks and whatnot, revealed things that I'm sure were highly classified about our relationships with people within certain governments, where we couldn't waterboard them anymore because they got found out, right? So we couldn't waterboard them down in Guantanamo. So we'll drop them with some of our friends who can. Maybe we can't traffic children, to an island to entrap people, but maybe some of our other friends can. I'm saying.
You remember this is what Ron DeSantis got caught up in was the back in the day was the waterboarding issues, and he came out in favor of torturing the prisoners and that sort of thing, and kind of gave him a bad name for a while. I mean, but they tell us today that torture to that level does not reveal actually good intelligence, that people will just say anything to make
they'll say whatever they can to stop it. But and who knows? I mean, honestly, I don't condone torture, right? On the other hand, if somebody had kidnapped my daughter and I had them under my under my hands, I'd feel awfully sorry for them, because they're not going to get out that easily, right? I just don't believe in government sanctioned torture. I think it's a terrible idea, and I think that we should absolutely, not want to see that sort of thing going on. I do think that there are a lot of things that do need to be exposed, and I do think it needs to be exposed in a proper way, because there may be a nuance, a very, very minute piece of information that could cause, or risk lives, of active operatives that we have in the field or something like that. Or there may be.
That's the same thing I think he's talking about right now. And those compromising those may be leading countries right now.
Right. And that's a possibility. And so something like that, I get it. I understand that we need to have classified information. We do need to have some things that, some secrets that endure for, particularly long periods. But the majority of the stuff that is out there, if the only reason that they are keeping something classified is because it would be damning to the United States government or damning to a certain individual, that's not a good enough reason to keep something classified.
No, it needs to protect people as a whole, not an individual.
Right.
And that needs, exactly right. But who knows? I think we've seen it with Donald Trump and what's going on now, that I think that our intelligence communities, you take NATO, for instance, I think that our intelligence communities around the world have compromised so much with other intelligence communities that I believe, and I can't point to evidence or anything like that, it's just the Eddie's hypothesis, but I believe there is a consortium of those intelligence operatives that are now operating at a higher level than the government does. And
Well, see, that is the problem with the intelligence community. That in a way, having secrets, especially secrets that don't immediately become unclassified after the operation is complete, it really makes it difficult for members of Congress to hold them accountable, to monitor them, and ultimately, the federal government has our Congress. They are representing us, right? They're spending our money, our tax dollars.
a lot of
That's the rub. That is the rub. So ultimately, what needs to happen is these things need to be defunded.
Well,
And
I
that
think
can be
that's
done.
what they're going to do, right? So we have a lot of unelected bureaucrats that run this country, and they belong to one committee or another. I think there's over 3 million federal employees, like almost 1% of the population, close to it, work
Sure.
for the federal government. But Donald Trump only appoints 3,000 of those. So the majority of those people that are an unelected bureaucracy that make all these decisions that run many of the organizations that operate without our say so or being ran by an elected official, and this person's not going to answer to his constituents because he's not an elected individual and he's not answering to Donald Trump. So I think that the idea of the DOGE, the DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, is to go in and gut those unelected bureaucrats and all these weird things that have been created, unfortunately, not unlike Doge itself.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's the thing about it, right?
So the problem is that the number that you mentioned, those are the appointments that are made. These are political appointments
Right.
that are aligned with the current administration's policies, right? But then you've got a whole lot more what they call career appointments. So ultimately, there's a total of 8,222 SES, that's senior executive service positions, the majority of which are career appointments. And that's where the problem is, because those are your bureaucrats who get in there, who nobody elected, and and they're like that's the shadow government. Those are the guys really running things. And I think that those positions should not be for, I don't think they should be career appointments. I think they should be, if
I
they
don't think
need,
anybody should operate without impunity.
if they need those positions, then they should be, all of them should be non-career appointments.
Yeah, I
Because I
mean,
don't
you
think,
should be able to do something in which you can lose your job. I mean, you just cannot be somebody who's above the law.
well, and
These
I've
guys,
never believed,
they don't answer the president. So like, oh, the president's only going to be there for 4 years. I don't care about him. We got our own thing going on over here, and we're not worried about him. And that's what I believe is going on. Believe it a
well,
lot.
and they've been doing that, and a lot of those are in the Department of Defense. They're in the national security apparatus. They're in the intelligence community.
And the Department of Energy.
Yes, Department of Energy. That's they part of the intelligence community. So all of
I,
these
I've
things.
a lot of people, when it comes to what I do, the software that I use, and I would be sent around to different government facilities. I've taught Navy CVs. I've taught DOD, NIST, NS Tech. The one that creeped me out the most to be in the room with, and you could tell they were just on a whole different level, was the Department of Energy guys.
Yeah.
They did not want to talk about anything.
Well, what people don't understand just how big the intelligence community is. I mean, there's the 3-letter agencies that everybody knows about, right? The CIA, NSA, FBI is part of that. DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency. You got NGA, which is your National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. NRO, that's a big one. Those are all your spy satellites and all of that. National Reconnaissance Office. Then you end up going into Department of State, Bureau of Intelligence and Research, INR, right? Department of Homeland Security, which includes a whole bunch of stuff under it. Department of Energy, that's part of the intelligence the Office of Intelligence and Counterintelligence, which is a part of the Department of Energy.
You
You
as
have,
well.
that's right. You have the Office of Intelligence and Analysis, which is part of the Department of Treasury. You've got U.S. Army Intelligence and Security Command, INSCOM, Office of Naval Intelligence, Air Force Intelligence, Surveillance and Reconnaissance, Marine Corps Intelligence Activities.
O&I
Coast
was
Guard.
secret for a very long time. O&I was a secret entity for a long time, so much so that when people found out about it, a lot of people got in trouble for just asking, "Hey, where's the Department of O&I? Hey, shut up, come here. What are you talking about?
Well,
Who told you about it?"
You also have, I'm only got a couple more left, National Intelligence Council, ODNI, which is Office of Director of National Intelligence, which I think Tulsi Gabbard's going to do a great job there. And the newest one, Space Force Intelligence, Surveillance and Reconnaissance. So
what the hell is Space Force, though, for real? I mean, what is it? I mean, I don't understand the Space Force thing. I don't.
I could tell you, but I could tell you, but I have to kill you.
Right? So, I mean, this is one of the tallest things in the world to me.
Man,
Like,
okay, so I think part of the goal is that the military, right, has always worked in terms of domains. Now, granted, what people don't realize is that the Army has more ships than the Navy because logistics is controlled by the Army largely. But you have Navy, which their operational war space is basically on our seas, right? You've got the Coast Guard, which basically guards our protected waters. You have the Air Force, the Army, the Marine Corps. They're basically land and sea, but all of those have a certain area that kind of belongs to them. They even have all the services deal in cybersecurity. You have a cyber warfare, department basically falls under NSA, right? And that's why the director of the NSA has to be a military commander because they do military operations as well. Cybercom. But we didn't really have that for space. And the fact is that we're so dependent upon satellite, technology and, basically everything that's going on outside of our atmosphere. And so I think that was the onus behind the creation of Space Force, is that we needed to have something there that it has its solitary mission, which is basically protecting our the United States interests in space. And I think we're seeing more and more of that going out there. Looks like I lost Eddie. Hopefully he'll be back. So I think, the problem is that one might argue that we've got too much going on in all these agencies and not enough oversight. And I would agree there. I do think that there's not enough oversight. I think we absolutely need to have a much larger presence of our representatives keeping an eye on what is going on. And I think that really is what's wrong with this whole picture, because what everybody in every single one of those agencies has done is they have all sworn the oath to protect the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And the problem is that many of these organizations have people who are working in them that are not protecting the Constitution. And the truth is, they're basically spending our U.S. tax dollars. And in some ways, they're weaponizing the government against the American people. This is what, and I hate to say it, but I never thought I would ever say this, but this is what Snowden was warning people about. He was trying to warn people that, these intelligence systems that were created were being turned against the American people and weaponized. But he wasn't the first to tell us this. You had Bill Binney, and you had others that spoke up about these surveillance systems being turned on American citizens. And we should have listened then. But this is why I believe I think this is why there's so much that we have to be concerned about in regards to how money is spent within the intelligence agencies. To answer truthful troll, your question about Snowden over Manning. So Manning, he brought up things I think that were important as well. But in particular, what if I remember right, what he was bringing up was there were diplomatic cables and things like that. He just kind of had a huge dump of information, some of which was relevant and important, I think, for for people to know about, and then some of it which I don't think was necessary. But I think the big things that he exposed that should have been made public was when the U.S. fired on its own people, accidental or not, that shouldn't be covered up. And I think that's something that there needs to be. There's been talk by Cash and talk by others that there needs to be a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I do think this is an important thing that we need to have in place. I think we need there to be a group that is dedicated, that is accountable to Congress, that is essentially working on behalf of the U.S. citizen to go into all of these agencies, and and then they get a say on what gets declassified, because there's a lot of things that are hidden and are kept classified for the purpose of it being something that's not popular or something that is maybe embarrassing or whatever, and they don't want that information being declassified. So they use classification as a means of being able to hide, what they're doing. I mean, a perfect example is the trillions of dollars that disappeared out of the Pentagon. How do you lose
$2.3 trillion?
How do you lose $2.3 trillion? I can't even quantify that number in my head.
What's weird to me is the sequence of events. September 10th, Donald Rumsfeld comes out, holds a news conference. $2.3 trillion has been basically misappropriated from the Pentagon. And the following day, I'll just say it, a missile hit the Pentagon and destroyed the area of the Pentagon that held the financial records. And the reason I say it was a missile is because what we know is the side of the Pentagon, the hole that was on the side of that building, was 10 foot by 16 foot. And there were windows on both sides of that hole, which were intact, which wouldn't be if plane wings hit the building.
Yeah, I'm not going to speculate on that, but I will tell you this, that I was working actually down in that area, and I drove by it every day as it was being rebuilt. What does bother me is that they don't seem to ever be held accountable for that money. And I'll tell you where I think that money's gone to.
Everybody who tried to investigate it after the fact lost their jobs.
Yes, and not only that, but also there are all these programs that we are spending money around the world on that I recently came across something that was really eye-opening to me, and that was the Non-Proliferation and Disarmament Fund. And folks, you can go check this out yourself. You can go look it up. Somebody had sent me a request for proposal on a contract, because I'm a contractor. I have contracts with federal government and others. But what I was sent was this request for proposal asking for various contractors to provide information on something that they were looking to do, and what they were looking to do,
or whatever.
Yeah, what they expressed in this request for proposal was a number of things that were very concerning. Number one, it was about bio labs, and they call it biological labs with HCPs, I think, or HCAs.
What's the acronym? What is the acronym?
I think it's something like highly contagious agents or something like that, but I'd have to look it up. But the thing is that what they were talking about was not labs in the U.S. They were talking about labs in the country of Chile. Now, why in the hell are we spending our tax dollars to basically retrofit labs down in Chile to network them together. So they were looking for a cybersecurity component to this, and that's why I was sent this. But what bothered me was that there were two things that I noticed, or a few things that I noticed in this RFP. One of them was that it said that they were able to operate outside the bounds of the Constitution and congressional oversight. So are we talking about black budgets? Are we talking about black operations? The other thing that they said was that they had the ability to do 0-day budgets. Now, I'm not 100% sure what that is, but what I think it is that they can just decide to spend money without having to get congressional approval.
I mean, human capital assessment.
No, that's not what it was. It specifically was related to contagious agents. But I probably have the wrong words, or maybe even the wrong acronym, but it was something like that. Basically, when I looked it up, it was these highly contagious labs that are dealing with very contagious things. And what it sounded like to me was it sounded like laboratories designed to do, say, I don't know.
Okay, I see it. It's high consequence agent.
That's it. High consequence agent. That's it. Yeah. And so basically, it looked to me like they were talking about labs that would be designed to do things like maybe biological weapons testing, development, maybe gain of function testing.
That's what I think was going on in Ukraine.
Yes. And so interestingly enough, this whole thing came out right after Russia invaded and, had basically taken out all of these labs. So I think, one of the things that it asked for is they were looking for how these labs could be rapidly shut down. They wanted the capability of being able to basically burn these labs down, like, within minutes, to basically destroy all evidence, destroy all the data, all of that. Mm-hmm. They were also looking at how they could make these labs internetworked together. They wanted them to be securely networked together. And that was a big portion of the cyber part.
Upload data and destroy
Yep.
the one lab and upload the data.
That's right. So, and then the last thing I'll mention about this that was very disturbing was it said they wanted this to be a prototype for something that could be repeated with other, they said with other partner nations. So meaning we're doing this all over the world. We have labs all over the world. It's not just the Ukraine. It's not just China, because we paid for the stuff. We paid for the development of COVID in China. We know that now. It's going on.
And we got many videos now.
Other countries too.
Public with Fauci going in and out of CIA headquarters during that whole COVID time consistently.
That's right. So I think there's money that's being spent, and it's being spent in a way and through means that are not accountable to Congress, and that needs to stop.
That leads me to a whole other line of questioning, though. How can legally, is there any provision in the Constitution or any law that allows for an entity to exist over, above, or outside the reach of our government? I mean, where is any provision for that? Where is that written down anywhere? I mean, how do these people operate that way legally? And I mean, we know this is the reason why the military has $600 screwdrivers and things like that, because the money's going somewhere else. But I mean, in all reality, this has to be 1,000% illegal.
I'm sure it probably is, and I'm sure it's it's one hand washing the other. I'm looking up right now to see how much the Non-Proliferation Disarmament Fund gets. So in 2006,
I remember this from months ago. I heard you talk about this before.
Yeah. So check this out. So the NDF typically manages 18 to 25 active projects simultaneously, with a combined value exceeding 289 million. So that's what we know about. What don't we know about?
Right. And just to go down a sideways rabbit hole here, and just a lot of people talk about this, and now it's become a big joke, but it's a very real thing. It's very serious, and there are programs like it around the world that the United States operates, and some that even our adversarial countries operate, like HARP. Who's in control of HARP?
Yep. Here's something interesting. So it says it's important to note that NDF funds are classified as no-year funds, meaning they remain available until fully expended, providing flexibility to respond to emerging threats without constraints of a specific fiscal year. So this is the problem, right? We don't know, like, how much do they have left that they've been collecting over the years? Like, how is that not, it's not like other offices that basically, if they don't spend their money, it's got to go back, into the treasury or wherever.
I like Vivek's idea of a $0 baseline budget until you justify the money you need. I love that idea.
Yeah.
It
So
was
if by some miracle, Vivek or Elon Musk is watching the show, go check out the NDF funding, and anybody else for that matter that has what's called no-year funds, where they can basically remain available until fully expended without any kind of fiscal year constraints, because that is almost assuredly, a recipe for corruption and for money being spent without really anybody knowing how that money's being spent. How do you audit?
When the guy got in front of our Congress not long ago in one of the weirdest sessions I ever seen, the 3 men testifying about the UFOs.
Yeah.
In a rare instance where AOC and Marjorie Taylor Greene and everybody got along. Like, no one attacked these guys. No, everyone was just like, I've never seen this with anything ever. And these people were talking about, we've been in contact with a biological entity. He didn't want to call them aliens. He said,
I thought that was interesting.
Non-human biological entities, which are called NHBIs, non-human biological entities. And he refused. And he was talking like, he kept correcting. It's like, you're talking like they're from another planet. And there's, and I started getting the feeling that he was saying that it wasn't a planetary thing, but more of a dimensional thing.
Yeah, that's kind of the sense that I got too. And I've, this is something that is really, it's an interesting subject. I would say it's an interesting subject to me, but the truth is, it's an interesting subject to everybody. I mean, we've all watched X-Files, and
Sure.
we've all wanted to know whether or not we were alone in the universe and all of that. The fact is that most, I think, astrophysicists will tell you that the probability of something coming from another planet or another star system is damn near next to impossible, because of just the distances that it would take for somebody to get here from there.
Yeah.
But the possibility that we don't understand everything there is to know about dimensions and multiverses and and things like that. Or how about the fact that we know more about the surface of Mars than we do about the surface of our ocean? Listen, I'll just say it. Years ago, when I was interested in looking at these types of things and kind of digging into what I had access to and could look at, there
you spill the beans.
Well, no, I'm just saying there wasn't a whole lot there that's already been exposed, and some of those exposures came due to lawsuits. And one of the big ones that I remember, now I don't see this stuff anymore, but for a while there on the CIA's webpage, if you went to it, you could find all of these declassified ship logs from the Navy, U.S. Navy, where they had basically reports of unidentified submersible objects. They had contacts that basically were things that they couldn't explain.
Can I get territorial for a minute? So this is something we were talking about George Norrie earlier. Before we got online, I'm trying to get him on the show because I just think he's one of the most interesting people. He deals with a lot of very interesting folks. And so one of the people on Coast to Coast, I used to work a graveyard shift years ago as an IT guy. and Coast to Coast kept me up all night. That was my thing. And they were saying that there was a guy basically saying that, and it started with the talk of Antarctica, and they said something about this stuff called sky ice, and it was blue. And they didn't. This is part of the reason why they didn't let people go beyond a certain point within Antarctica. And then he went on, and I'm just saying that's not what Eddie believes, folks. So Eddie just don't know.
Disclaimer. Disclaimer.
Saying,
let me remove my tinfoil hat.
Exactly. It's not what I believe. But I just think it was one of the most interesting theories I'd ever heard. And he was saying that because of and he was using the Bible to justify it. He was saying that when God said that he used a firmament to separate the waters above from the waters below.
Yeah.
That what we're looking at up there is water. Yeah. And when you look at the telescopes, you see water. But it gets more interesting than that. He's saying the reason that you're seeing USOs from the ocean is because the ocean, in certain ways in the ocean, is actually how you get beyond that firmament. So you're going down and out beyond the firmament through the ocean.
I recently saw some video that popped up, probably because I was looking at all of the UFO coverage, in Congress, but I had some video that popped up talking about that. It was the first time I'd ever heard that. I will say this much.
It's interesting.
I wholeheartedly 100% reject the notion of flat Earth. And I have reasons that I can't get into, things that I've seen classified that I can't get into, that beyond a shadow of a doubt in my mind, I have no doubt that we live on a globe. Why? Now, that said, what's under the earth? What's under the oceans? Who knows? I couldn't tell you, and I don't that I don't know, and I'm open to the possibility that
I believe this wholeheartedly, Nate. Wholeheartedly, this is something that I believe. India and China, long ago, before they knew about each other's civilizations, before they interacted with subterranean entities that both gave them writing, and they gave them writings, and they talked about a place called Agartha. Yeah. And they used the same word, even though these people never spoke to one another at that point. And they were using the same words. And then when you take a look at Job, for instance,
India and China?
I believe it was India and China.
Yeah, Japan also too, by the way, and they're ancient. I lived in Japan for 3 years and found it fascinating. I always loved to learn about culture, and I studied about their mythology. And they have a very fascinating mythology that talks about people that came from under the, basically came from the oceans, but they were also subterranean, reptilian type beings, right? And they called Richard them the Naga.
You know what Richard Byrd's account was, right? Going out to the South Pole, and and he came back and he did interviews in Australia, and he was, and that interview's out there for anyone to look at it. And he said there were things flying around in the polar regions that were flying, and I'm going to quote him right now. He said, "From pole to pole." Now, how in the hell could he go to the South Pole and see something fly from pole to pole in no time flat? But he said that in Australian TV. Came back here, you heard nothing more from the guy. It was kind of it. Yeah. And then his granddaughter released his diary after he passed on.
Well, the other thing too that's fascinating when you get into this kind of like ancient mythology and ancient writings is in India they had I can't remember the name of them, but basically they had the gods that came from the skies, and then they had the gods that came from down below. And the ones that came from down below were reptilian. The ones that came from the sky, they were winged, creatures, and they were in a war against each other. And human beings were caught in the middle of it. What's interesting was there's some interesting writings about this sort of thing also in Sumeria, and Zachariah Sitchin has talked a lot about that. And so look,
Anunnaki,
and then you come to the Americas, and you have Choco Canyon, which is fascinating because it's a place that has these perfectly, symmetrical circular buildings that the Native Americans, the Hopi, basically claim they didn't build. They were built before they got there by the people they called the Sky People, called the Anasazi. So look,
and let's not forget, like, the pyramids and all that actually exist.
And
right out here in the Grand Canyon, like
Yep.
in the canyon itself.
Yeah, and the fact is, when you get to the point of there's enough evidence that we don't know everything, and that, and I'm perfectly happy to accept that we don't know anything. We don't know everything about the history of the earth. We don't know everything about. Look, the Bible talks about the Nephilim. And, you may not learn this in Sunday school, but it clearly talks about, angelic beings, mating with human women and creating giant. It says they were the giants of renown. They were the, what does that sound like? That's right.
Men of old, and it's in Numbers.
That's right. It sounds like the demigods, that are described in the Greek and Roman mythology. There's almost, in almost every culture, there's a, either a sea serpent or a hydra or some, dragon-like creature that's defeated by either Thor's hammer or by a sword or some other, instrument. Even as far, as detached as Japan, they have this story. It is everywhere. And so when you have these numbers, so is
the story, the Epic of Gilgamesh, Noah's
yes,
flood.
it's in the Epic, exactly. So you have to ask yourself, now maybe certain stories have been polluted over, the years and retold and interpolations and different changes that happen, but I think there's more to our history than we understand. And and I'll tell you, as far as the UFO phenomenon is, concerned, when my mother, who I trust profoundly, who's never lied to me except about Santa Claus when I was little, but both her and my aunt shared with me that in 1975, when I was a passenger in the car, 1 year old, I'm sitting in the back seat, but they were driving up the coast of California, and they had a UFO encounter. And what they both described, these two witnesses, two people that I know and trust, is they were around Monterey, California, and they had this encounter with this, UFO flying saucer, basically lit up all around it. And it was shooting down light down on Earth that had like smoke-filled light, and it would beam up, and then it would shoot across the sky really fast and come to an immediate halt, beam down light, and then shoot across. It was like doing this all over the place, and then all of a sudden it took off, and then they hit a fog embankment, and they said it scared the shit out of them, and they were completely afraid. I have no reason.
Even the same ancient texts in like India and that talk about these things, they just use the word Vimana.
Yeah.
And people who believe that these characters actually have a religion based around it called Zoroastrianism, where they talk about this is where for those of you who don't know, you get the magic carpet rides from that came out of the Aladdin story and all that. That was the Vimana. And that's where that all originated from. But I mean, I've been living in Nevada for as long as I have. I've seen things myself. The funny thing is when you're out and you're out and you're further out in the desert, like we'll go take the quads like way out, and there's zero light pollution. And
all right, I'm gonna throw something out there. Maybe those are the parts of the JFK situation that aren't being released. Stuff having to do, he said it's about nothing that we've talked about or even thought about. Maybe that's what
he was killed by ET.
That's right.
But here's the thing: I can tell you my own experience, and I have no problem. It's legit. Me and a buddy of mine who flew out from Baltimore. I was just taking him around sightseeing, and he wanted to see some of the places on the outskirts. He didn't want to see the city. So we went out pretty far, and what they call the extraterrestrial highway, it's 160. And we just pulled off, and we're looking at some of that. I'm not one of those people who believe in getting close to 51. I'm not trying to tempt fate and walk up to the mailbox like other idiots do. Not doing that. But where we pulled off at, we were just looking because the stars looked like they were so close you could reach out and grab them. So when we saw what we saw, we didn't even realize what we were seeing because you're so encapsulated by all of the other lights from the stars that you don't see the thing that's moving. And he touches me, he says, "Do you see that?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" And what it was, it didn't look like no saucer. It didn't look like none of that kind of stuff. It looked like just a ball of, I wouldn't say fire, but definitely a ball of something. Just a flashing ball of inconsistent light.
Yeah.
And it was just moving like a firefly.
Yeah.
And then it was doing all this, and then it just came to a screeching stop. Like all of a sudden, like someone just hit the brakes. And then it just went straight down. And that was it.
Yeah.
That's all we saw of it. And that was the craziest thing I'd ever seen. I have pictures of it. I actually do have pictures of it, but when you look at them, it doesn't look like anything. It looks like nothing.
So I saw something over 20 years ago in a file that matches what you described. And that's about all I can say about it. But we were aware of these things at least 20 years ago, and they outran our fastest thing. I'll just say that.
But here's the thing, right?
And there was imagery. So yeah, these things, they don't know what they are. Now I'll tell you this: I've never had my own encounter. There's things I've seen that I'm not sure about, but because I spent a lot of time out in the wilderness and the woods when I was young, and but I grew up in the city, so it was a lot of light pollution and all of that.
Sure.
But I will say this, that there are things that I have seen that most people would probably think I was joking, and I'm talking about things that are on the area of the demonic. And I've also had encounters with other things that I don't really want to get into, but I've had some encounters with things that are hard to explain, and I'll just say that that I am much more open-minded today than I was 20 years ago.
Oh yeah.
And and what we see going on right now, being exposed and talked about in our own government, is interesting. I do have to question the timing of it, though. It is weird, the timing of all of this. There's is there some reason that they're now just starting to be, to talk about and disclose this kind of stuff now that they couldn't disclose it before? Or?
We're talking prophetically. If you take a look at the great imam, the what do they call it? I believe it's the great imam, and it was the Mahdi, which is in the Islamic faith, the nation. They believe that someone's going to come from space. Like, this is their actual belief. This is what Louis Farrakhan
is supposed to come down. He's supposed to descend from the heavens, and the scriptures talk about that his feet will touch the Mount of Olives and split it in two.
But there's a lot that when you look at the the figurehead that comes from Islam, it lines up with what we would call the Antichrist. But to them, that is their Christ.
Right.
But it lines up perfectly with what we and then vice versa for them as well. So it's the great deception is what the Bible talks about, the great deception. And there have been a lot of debate over what the great deception is. And I think the great deception may just be the idea that an alien is going to come from outer space, and then the government is going to say, "Hey guys, look, this is our new friend ET." And
interesting that you mentioned that, because that is exactly what I think is going to happen. In fact, it's our discussion has gone way off topic, but I'm enjoying this conversation because, and I want to continue because I do think it's important. The scriptures talk about the basically the great falling away, and it says that the deception will be so great that if it were possible to deceive even the elect,
Yeah, even the elect. Yeah,
And so what in the world could possibly be something that would do that? And the only thing that comes to mind, and I remember thinking about this, back 30 years ago, is if UFOs showed up all of a sudden everywhere on Earth, and they came out and they showed us with, whatever technological advantage they have over us, that, they could manipulate genetics, and that they they basically developed us or created us here with, genetic manipulation.
Oh yeah.
And,
I've heard
that
that.
would,
This is
that
the
would be,
Anunnaki story where we were a slave race to
that would be pretty devastating to most of the world's religions. And I think most of the world religions would be impacted primarily because they just never talked about any of this stuff. And even though there are hints of it in the Bible, nobody talks about it. And I think it would cause great deception. I think you would have a massive falling away. I wouldn't. And the reason I wouldn't have a falling away, and this is important. I want to share this with anybody that's listening right now. I would not be fazed by this, not one bit. And I'll tell you why. Because I've had personal encounters with Jesus Christ. I've had a personal encounter with the Holy Spirit. I have seen miraculous things take place, and it wasn't no UFO or alien that did it. And I'm perfectly okay acknowledging that I don't understand the physics of how everything in this world works. I'm perfectly okay with the concept that there are, there are angels and demons and other beings that the Bible talks about.
It says, "Where were you when I created the behemoth?"
That's right.
Remember?
Well, there's some other things it talks about too. It talks about in the Old Testament. It talks about being careful to show hospitality to strangers. It says because you may unintentionally, be entertaining an angel, and so that means that they can become physical, because if they're eating with you, clearly
you're getting into my territory now. So I was talking to James Harrison the other day, Nate, and this is exactly what I said to him. And it goes back to that conversation that Job and that took place in Job between Satan and God. And God said, "Where have you been?" And Satan said, "Walking around in and on the earth." And then if you read the Bible even further, it says Satan was cast down out of heaven as an angel of light, and his followers in the image of righteous men. And with you couple that with the fact that the men that walked around in Sodom and Gomorrah appeared to be men, as well as the ones that appeared outside of Abraham's tent that they went and got provision for while Abraham sat and ate with them, and Jacob who wrestled the angel. So if you take all of that, then you have to realize that there may be, because they were cast down here onto this earth. So we may very well have people we think are men masquerading as men who really are not men. And then when you couple that with the fact that
we got men masquerading as women, so it would surprise me.
Remember when Jesus said that, "What if I were to allow them to live until I return? What is it to you?" And I think back on that, and I'm like, wow, because that's
in Genesis,
that's a wild statement to justify.
In Genesis, it says, "And God said, let us make man in our image." Now,
in our image,
a lot of people they say, well, that's the Trinity, but the Trinity as a concept didn't exist to the Jews.
Well, it was the Elohim. It was the Godhead.
The word Elohim, the word Elohim means it literally translates. It's a plural word, and there are places in the Bible where it is translated as messengers. So, so what? So what if God used his angels to, is it possible that we were seated, that we were created with the aid of God's angels? Possibly, which some might interpret as being aliens. The one thing that I know is that the scriptures make it very clear on how, as Christians, we are to test these beings, right?
Yeah, is Jesus the Son of God?
Do they recognize Christ or not? If he's my Lord and Savior, he should be theirs too. Maybe that's why the scripture says that we should preach to all creatures. Maybe there's a reason why it says that. Right?
Philip Schneider, who's a character that's often talked about on places like Coast to Coast and George Norrie and those, tells these fantastical tales about these tunnels underground where these beings are. And he even tells a tale of that's how he got his hand sliced evenly sideways across because they accidentally drilled into one and he ended up in a firefight with them, and they shot him with some kind of laser that sliced his hand at a diagonal thing right here.
Yeah.
And then it goes on to talk about how there are humans that work alongside of them. And then when you hear the three people that testified in front of Congress, they said the same thing.
Yeah.
So and you can't even, my understanding from people that came forward is that you cannot even utter the name Jesus Christ in those places. Like, it's not allowed.
Well, I'll tell you this. Like I said, I've had a lot of encounters with spiritual entities that acted in physical ways in my life when I was a teenager. It's part of the reason that I am as strong a Christian as I am today, because what saved me from that was Christ. And I remember not fully understanding, because I was a new Christian, the power of the name of Jesus. But I had encounters where I would get woken up and have a dark, shadowy entity over me, choking me, and smothering me, and not being able to move. And they call it,
A waking dream.
well, they call it sleep paralysis. I call bullshit on that, and I'm going to tell you why. Because if it was sleep paralysis, then why, when I could fight to get the words out of my mouth in the name of Jesus be gone, did it immediately leave? And not only that, but it always happened around the same time at 3 a.m. And I remember a buddy of mine who was one of my Christian brothers that we spent a lot of time praying together. I called him at 3 a.m. after I had this encounter, and he was having the exact same encounter at his house, a city away, at exactly the same time. And it was a little freaky.
That's also a biblical thing. You remember in Daniel chapter 9 where it was in chapter 10 actually, where the angel came to Daniel and he told Daniel, I would have gotten here sooner, but I had to battle with the Prince of Persia in the second heaven, which is space. If anyone doesn't know, the Bible talks about there being several heavens. The first one is the sky that you see. The second one is space. And he had to do battle with the Prince of Persia in space. So this is a physical being, once again, coming to Earth, get to Daniel to deliver a message that has to fight somebody in interstellar space, right? And then finally get to Daniel to deliver this message. And he said that the Prince of Persia was basically the guardian of that area of the world. So evidently demons have these regions that belong to them that they oversee and they protect. It's pretty wild. There's a guy out here, Nate, by the name of Prophet Yahweh or something like that. He calls
I know
himself.
You're talking about the guy that can summon UFOs.
Man, it's crazy. He actually, Channel 13 News here in Las Vegas.
I saw that video.
Guys, if you have not seen this video, go look. So the news, the regular local news guy who I've talked to, he's went out to Rancho Park on the other side of town here, and they just brought their news cameras out live, and this guy just started praying at the sky, and they're like, nothing happened, and they just we're going to write it off. And the next thing you know, here comes this damn UFO in the frame, flies out over Nellis Air Force Base, and then flies back and then flies up.
Yeah.
And they were awestruck. They didn't know what to say. They had no idea, like what I don't even know how to process this.
So it's interesting. Actually, I was thinking about that video not too long ago because
I'm going to try to find it.
One of the guys that was testifying before Congress made the comment that when he was asked about, these things, where they come from, they come from outer space or whatever. I trying to remember what exactly he said, but he made the comment something like, well, they seem to be more like they're summoned. Did you hear? Do you remember that? It was just
No.
recently. Yeah, it was just recently. One of the testifiers on Capitol Hill mentioned something about that the government summoning these craft. It sounds like what that guy was doing, you know?
But I mean, he appeared the way he was praying. I'm not going to lie. He appeared to be a kook.
Well, and I looked into his religion and all of that. It seems pretty much like, you know, it seems pretty much like a cult. But you know, this is the thing, and this is what people are going to be, you know, they have to be reminded of. The miraculous.
Here it is. I actually have the video. I actually was able to find it.
Pull it up.
He's got to see this.
Boy, we're way off topic tonight, man.
Yeah, but this is interesting.
Stuff.
This is definitely interesting. Here you go.
Now, UFOs.
That's right. And there was a Las Vegas guy made extraordinary claim about extraterrestrials.
Can you hear it?
Actually, recorded live down the street out here. Check it out. Mike.
All right, guys, just listen up here. This guy says
Getting feedback. You're right.
Taught him how to summon UFOs. All right, he says he can also do this on command, and he adds he's been doing it for 25 years, keeping all of it secret until now.
These beings are here. They're here. They're just sitting right up there.
We met up with Prophet Yahweh, seer of Yahweh, at Doolittle Park off Lake Mead. We picked the day, we picked the time, and we picked the location.
Everyone's going to think you're absolutely nuts. Well, I thought I was absolutely nuts.
Until he says he saw UFOs. Over the years, 1,500 of them.
Can we make it 1,501 today? What do you think? I'll try it.
He says the voice in his head told him to go public now, so we took him up on his offer, and we scanned the skies. Nothing but a few clouds. When the prophet started praying for a sighting, I wasn't exactly convinced.
I pray, oh Yahweh, that you send a sighting so that they know that I am not mentally ill. I am not a false prophet, like those who seek to kill me say I am.
I see something straight up.
Oh, brother, look at it. There it is.
You can barely see it, a white speck. Then another sighting.
There it is. I got it.
Photojournalist Jonathan Hawkins locks in on it. Let's take a closer look here. It's an orange sphere that appeared out of nowhere. I call the boss with an unexpected change in my story.
I can see it clear as day. In fact, it's bright.
I can't believe this.
It's moving pretty fast.
It's going to Nellis Air Force Base. It wants to be seen.
We called Nellis to see what these things might be. Guess what? They didn't call us back. But this thing started coming back toward us.
It's coming toward us now, I think.
What?
See, it's coming up toward us.
Whoa, man! Oh, hallelujah!
Then, a few seconds later, it disappeared.
It's going back up in space.
Prophet Yahweh isn't concerned. He says it'll be back.
They're pretty neat stuff right there.
Yeah.
But he did also predict another date in the future from that video in which it was going to come down over Vegas and everyone was going to see it. That didn't happen.
Yeah.
And then obviously remember the kid that was here not long ago. There was something that they caught, it looked like an asteroid or something flipping as it was coming toward Vegas. And then he said he had, filmed something in his backyard, and it was like 8-9 foot tall. And there were a lot of videos that came out, and then there were reports that the kid faked it. And then there were reports that the kid was just being hassled so much over what he saw that he just said he faked it. And then these other videos got released where it looked like these things very tall, extremely tall, 8-9 foot tall had to be, that were cloaked, that were walking around in his backyard, and you could only see them against the backdrop of like the buildings and trees when they walked past them. It was wild. It's wild, but I don't know, but I know that the thing that flew toward Vegas and that thing that was flipping and rotating, that everyone saw that. That is a fact. But the outcome of that being, 9 foot tall aliens in the guy's backyard, who knows? But it's one of those things that once again caught the attention of the entire country for a few minutes because it was interesting. And if we just stop at interesting and say that, oh, nothing else could be true nothing more than we've ever been seen or nothing more than we've ever been told is true, then you're really cutting your nose off to spite your face, because you're not open to the truth.
Those are the kind of people that believe that that Epstein killed himself. So yeah, I think back to kind of where we started with all this is that I think that there's a lot of things that we're going to find out here that are going to surprise people. And I think it behooves us all to prepare ourselves mentally so that we don't get deceived. We have to remember that the media has a reason for showing things, that they have a narrative, that the government has a narrative that they want to put forward.
They have a script that
yep.
follow.
And we got to try to see through it. And a lot of that is, you want to know what's going to happen, just watch what comes out in Hollywood. Watch the movies that they show us. A lot of that is predictive programming. I 100% believe in that because I've seen it.
White Noise came out, then the train wrecked in East Palestine, Ohio. Then it came out that BlackRock wanted that mineral rights there. They found lithium in that area, and they wanted to have that area vacated. So I forget what the gas or the liquid that was the train was carrying, but the two things you didn't do to this liquid, like gremlins. Remember, you didn't feed them after midnight. You didn't.
Talking about it was polyvinyl chloride.
So, and if you burn this stuff, it turns into another chemical called phosgene, and it's very deadly. And then and the other thing you don't do is you don't put it in water, because it kills all of the. So all the deer and wildlife in this whole area they were just falling. There were dead deer everywhere for God knows. And to this day, to right now, still today, those people still have not received adequate help from the government. And it seems like everybody has forgotten about the incident, and that it was predicted by a movie that came out right before it actually happened, called White Noise. And then the World Left Behind, or whatever it was, that the Obama movie about the cruise ships wrecking into the shores, and the deer disease and all of that. And it may not have been to that level, but there were about 4 or 5 cruise ships that actually happened. And then do you remember, you're a hunter, right?
Yeah.
So you remember was a little over a year, 2 years ago, something like that, where there was some kind of a deer disease that was going around, and this was all after the movie. This was all after the movie came out. The movie talked about. It's wild. I some of these movies you get scared, like, oh, what are they planning now? What are they doing next?
Yeah. Well, the other thing too I like to do is I like to watch and see what what it is that the World Economic Forum is warning us about, because they seem to be spot on the money. They predicted COVID, and I think that's because they brought us COVID. I think that they've been talking about, I know when I was reading Klaus Schwab's latest book, he was talking about a cyber attack, on a scale of nothing like anything we've ever seen, that it will be, the ramifications will be worse than COVID.
I think most people agree with that, though. I think that's the new front line of wars, cyber war.
I think so. And that's my, that's right in my bailiwick. That's where I have a background and knowledge of, and I can speak from just my own knowledge that our national critical infrastructure, as well as everybody's in the world, is just wholly inadequate. I mean, but particularly in the U.S., why it's so bad is that it was built years ago, before cybersecurity was even a thought. Like, most people don't realize that, like, Eastern Europe has some of the most advanced, cyber protection and networks, and they've got, the broadband. Everybody's got broadband there. I mean, it's some of the best network space. Why? Because it was developed later. The stuff that we have here is pretty old, and a lot of it was built before security was even, a thought. A lot of SCADA and industrial control systems were built not intended to be hooked up to the internet. They were intended for somebody to have to go on site, plug in a console, and do things manually. And they discovered that wasn't cost effective and wasn't good for real time monitoring. So they've connected these things to the internet, but they have terrible security. And so a lot of our water treatment plants, a lot of our power grid,
gas pipelines. Remember now, a few years back.
Yep, gas pipelines. Food manufacturing plants. Everything
run down in the last 4 years.
Yeah,
and many of them due to actual arson. 400.
Do you remember the Texas? There was the Texas dairy farm that like 1,500 head of cattle burned.
Overnight in 80-degree or 90-degree weather. It wasn't even like.
So check this out. So after that, I just thought, this sounds like a scenario that I may or may not have seen in some sort of exercise. I remember thinking, I wonder if this was a cyber attack. So I looked up this farm, and they had this expose in some agriculture magazine or something the year before that was showcasing this farm as being all high tech and connected to the internet and everything. And they basically had these robotic pooper scoopers that were going behind all these dairy cows and picking up their dung and then depositing it into the machine that basically turned methane into fuel to create electricity. And they were running the farm. Everything was being run, all remote. And what was crazy and what caught my attention as a cybersecurity professional was that they showed the equipment, including the model, the make, which makes it very easy for somebody who wants to attack, a site. Like if you're doing, if you're planning an attack on a site, like step one, figure out what kind of equipment they have.
Yeah, get the diagram.
And the way you do that, and I remember a scenario that I learned was, you go to like a job listing, right? And what kind of equipment are they asking people for experience in? Then you know what kind of equipment they have, and then you can reverse engineer that to find out, okay, what model are they on? And now you can do testing to find out whether or not they have those patches and all of that, the latest and greatest updates. You can go look and see. Most people aren't current on their patches, so you can go look and see what are the vulnerabilities in the latest release notes that have been fixed. Likely they haven't applied the latest fix, and so you can exploit those. That is what's been going on for a long time. So I surmise, and I don't know for certain, but I surmise that was a cyber attack on that place, and that's how they made it happen. So,
well, one more thing I want to get to before we get out of here, because we got way off topic for a long time, but I think this is one that everybody can get behind, and I want to play a clip about it first, and I'll let you talk to it.
Cheney was behind it, and so was Benny Thompson, and everybody on that committee. For what they did, honestly, they should go to jail.
So you think Liz Cheney should go to jail?
For what they did.
Everyone on the committee, you think?
I think everybody anybody that voted in favor.
Are you going to direct your FBI director and your attorney general to send them to jail?
Not at all. I think that they'll have to look at that, but I'm not going to. I'm going to focus on drill, baby, drill.
Amen, brother.
Yeah.
Listen, if we don't see justice, then we are doomed to repeat everything that happened under the Biden administration again. All it will take is another, some other, president, some other administration to get in there and utilize all of those tools to spy on the American people, to jail American citizens that didn't commit any crime, other than expressing their First Amendment right to protest against their government. What was at the beginning of that conversation that Trump talked about today is that he intends to pardon the January 6ers. He's going to begin looking into it, he said, on day one. And I think he absolutely must. The biggest miscarriage of justice that this country has seen, really, since probably, the mass detentions, under World War II of Japanese Americans. This has been nothing less than political, creating a political prisoner system in our country. And it is the way that these prosecutors have used prosecutorial enhancements, to basically give them 20-year, 40-year
Yeah.
sentences.
I know too many people in my own personal life that have those things have happened too.
Yeah.
Where they have a basic charge that it'd be a misdemeanor otherwise, but then what happens is the DA they have these things called enhancements.
Yeah.
So and you can get another 5, 10, 15 years. And then they have these things where you're convicted of thought crimes when you go to court, and they call them conspiracy to commit.
That's right.
So they don't have to prove that you actually did that. They just have to create a case that makes it look like that's what you were thinking about doing, and it carries massive amounts of time.
Yeah, I recently had on my show the mother of Enrique Tarrio, who this guy was charged for basically seditious conspiracy and against the U.S. government for January 6th. Now here's the problem: he wasn't there on January 6th at all.
Nope,
not there.
He was in where was he at? Is it Virginia or Maryland? I forget which one, but he wasn't in D.C.
No, was not in D.C. and I thought it was like Alabama or something like that. But he lives in
and I know he was with the night before that. He was with Bryson Gray because Bryson talked about it on my show.
So the way that they got him was basically him probably popping off at the mouth that with buddies on chat or whatever on Signal, man. If they steal this election, we need to fight them and not allow this to happen. Probably something, and I'm guessing it was probably something along those lines. And they consider that conspiracy. If they can do that, folks, then we're all in trouble. So we've got to correct this problem. And there are prosecutors that committed prosecutorial misconduct that withheld exculpatory evidence.
The footage of exculpatory evidence, and we even know Ryan Zink had to do prison time for evidence that they photoshopped even after they proved that the evidence was fake. This man still had to report
anyone who was involved in that kind of prosecutorial misconduct needs to go to prison. Anybody who was involved in in the Russia conspiracy to frame a sitting president and to frame and spy on a candidate for president needs to go to prison.
So that would put like who's Ted Turner, right? Ted Turner's at the top of that list. He's the owner of CNN. So they were complicit. They
Bank
knew
America
that
handed over records of American citizens without a warrant. This is government tyranny via proxy of third-party companies. All of these government officials who laid these plans need to go to prison for deprivation of rights under color of law. And so the Trump administration has a very difficult job ahead of them. But I believe if they follow the evidence, and I do believe the evidence is still there, you can't, digital records are forever. You can't destroy them. So they can try all they want, but the fact is there are plenty of people like myself who brought evidence out of places like the FBI or the CIA or the NSA or wherever, and brought it to Congress the right way, like I did. And Congress has a lot of this evidence, and they need to go through it. And I believe that when they go through it, there need to be prosecutions, and and these people that are brought up on charges need to have their fair day in court. But at the end of the day, if they're convicted, they need to go to prison, because otherwise this will never stop. Remember, you had a federal judge that said that over 458,000.
Do they get a fair day in court, or do they get to suffer at the hands of the legislation they created called the Patriot Act that says you get no day?
Give them a fair day in court, because we have to look. If we I'm a firm believer in fighting fire with fire, but more important than that, the Constitution. So, and everybody that was denied a fair trial in Washington, D.C., I don't believe anybody should be tried in Washington, D.C., because you can't get a fair trial. If you are a Republican, you're never getting a fair trial. And if you're a Democrat, you're likely you're going to get off. They should never hold a trial in a place that is that polarized as Washington, D.C.
I will never forget Igor Danchenko and Michael Cohen, or mine should be not Michael Cohen, Sussman.
Yeah.
Sussman, admitting guilt on the stand for the entire world to see. They admitted guilt. He said Hillary paid him to sit with the FBI and give them that dossier that they knew was fake. He admitted that on the stand. He tried to say, well, I wasn't there at the behest of the DNC and Hillary, and then come to find out he billed her for the time that he sat with her. And then he said Hillary was the one who instructed him to leak it after she knew the information was false.
Yeah.
So,
and then, by the way, all of this really only deals with the corruption that is in our federal courts. So it doesn't deal with the corruption that is in our state courts. Like all of this weaponization of the justice system in New York, that's, and in Georgia, that has been levied against Trump. There needs to be a reckoning for that. And there needs to be investigations into public corruption. Maybe the FBI needs to investigate public corruption in those cases.
Letitia James needs to have her feet held to the fire. So does Fannie Willis. Right. So does Alvin Bragg.
What about this?
Michael, what was his name? Michael. Starts the one that was sent from the State Department to New York that kind of reanimated the charges after Alvin Bragg said there's nothing there to charge Trump. And then Michael Paglioni, I forget his name. He gets sent there, and the State Department denied sending him there, but he quit a job at the State Department to come to New York, and then all of a sudden these charges are resurrected.
Yeah,
and they're all phony, including the E. Jean Carroll one, because she later on went on to do an interview that said nothing sexual occurred.
And there's going to be people in the previous Trump administration that are going to go down for this, because remember, most of these guys were part of the Trump administration in the FBI or in the Department of Justice. So those guys need to be called back too. You've got military people that need to be called into, court martials. I think for violations of the Constitution, and going, basically forcing vaccines on our soldiers that were not even authorized. There's so much criminality that has happened under the Biden administration. To be honest with you, I'd be happy with a little bit of justice. Just go after the big fish, because it will be years to get to some of the lower level guys that were involved. And now the problem is where I see a problem, like I said, is in these state courts. You got guys like we were going to talk about tonight is like Daniel Penny. And what's being done to him
right here. Can I play that clip real quick? I want people to see it.
Black Lives Matter, Greater New York. I stand here heartbroken because I have to hug a father who knows that the murderer of his son will most likely go free, who has to look in the face of a jury that no matter the facts, no matter the expert witnesses, no matter the people yelling on that train that day to let Jordan go, you will kill him. They will not find a white man guilty of killing a black man in modern day America. This is no different than Jim Crow. This looks like a picture out of the picture book when you look at that anonymous jury. We have baby boomers who were there during Jim Crow on this jury. We have young people who are looking at Daniel Penny as a hero. And what America is a hero, a killer. He didn't give a crap about Jordan. The medical examiner said Jordan turned purple. Yes, black people can turn purple when they're denied oxygen. Every lab report showed he died of asphyxiation. And that doesn't matter because they want to spare a white man the penalty of his crimes. America has not changed, and I hate to say it, it may never change. And people who keep asking, are we going to riot? Are we going to protest? Is that what's needed? Do glass have to break? Do cars have to burn for a black man to get justice in America? We can't show up with peace. We can't show up with facts. We can't show up with evidence and witness after witness. You give us nothing. And then you ask us to love this country. America hates black people, and we see it from that jury pool.
A black man was lynched, and his name was Jordan Neely.
That is so funny, and this is my take on this. And I've said it before. He didn't act alone. He acted with the help of 2 African American men to subdue this guy. He acted in defense of many African American people that were on that train. This was not racially motivated, and to say that a white man would not be indicted for taking the life of a black man, then what the hell was Derek Chauvin? What were the cops that lost their jobs behind Jacob Blake and Brittany Taylor and all of these events that took place? The chief of police that lost his job at the Trayvon Martin case down in Florida that happened years ago because he refused to charge George Zimmerman with a crime for protecting himself. Listen, what they're doing right now is what they always do. They're grifting after the fact to get a little bit of press because the news cameras were trained on them. Next thing you know, they get a lot of donations and a lot more publicity and all of the rhetoric they were spilling there. Not one time did they talk about the black people that had their lives threatened by Jordan Neely on that train before Daniel Penny stepped up and protected black people. That's crazy that this is all they see.
Yeah. Well, the bottom line is, the guy was threatening other people. So, this is just another example of a corrupt system. The guy should never even been charged. And, but
the crazy is that he was charged in the 2 others that helped him weren't. They should, if me and you do something together.
That's right. Aiding and abetting, right?
You get an accessory charge.
That's right.
2 men that helped him, their names aren't even known.
Yeah.
They targeted the white man, and it just wasn't enough.
That's not equal justice.
That's nuts to me.
No, but this woman sounds like, to me, she sounds like every other Marxist, talking about how she hates America. And
definitely a Marxist. They admitted to being Marxists. Remember, they were trained to get rid of the nuclear family. Their words, their own words. That's the BLM. That's the BLM model.
So we need to see a complete overhaul of our justice system, not just in the federal level, is the point I was trying to make, and that we need it at the state level as well. And fortunately, I live in a state like West Virginia, and I'll be honest with you, if I can avoid New York, I will avoid it altogether. I will drive around it if I can, because I don't want to take a chance at having to deal with a corrupt justice system in New York. Like
this is the picture of New York that we got growing up. Nate, I grew up in Baltimore City, and we always see New York as the tough guys, the stand up to anything, not take any BS, straight talkers. A lot of people in the country when I grew up considered them ignorant, but I always just knew they were just blatantly honest. And now is this picture that we get of New York are these ultra left-wing Marxist folks that are just, I don't know. I mean, what, red or blue pill or Kool-Aid they drank or whatever the hell has infiltrated our culture and in the minds of the people on the left that now turn on everything they used to stand for: free speech, women's rights, all of the basic tenets.
The ACL, what it is, man, it's demonic. It is demonic. In our current, I saw an interesting picture that somebody showed, and it had all of these people inside the Biden administration, with satanic pentagrams tattooed on them, involved in weird sex, kinks and fetishes. And
Taylor Swift's friend had one around her neck.
But I mean, I'm talking about, these are people like in positions of power within the government, within the federal government right now.
He was a Satanist. It was Joe Biden's cabinet member, and he was a Satanist. I forget his name.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll get.
But I mean, this is so when you have these kinds of people in positions of leadership, what else would you expect from this administration than demonic behavior? And to be honest with you, I believe it's steeped in state government too, in places like New York City, Los Angeles, in places like Hollywood. This is why we're seeing what we're seeing in our country today. Is you have a basically, demoniacs, demon possessed people who are in control and running things, but they're about ready to lose power. I do believe that, and I think that I think God has given us a reprieve. I think we're
His
going to
name,
see.
I got it. It's Dr. Dimitri Daskalakis.
Yeah.
That's his name. And he has pentagram tattooed on him and everything. But I'm sorry. You're right. Yeah, I think we get a 4-year reprieve. And then,
How we
it's
respond to that is going to make all the difference in the world. So,
yeah, agreed. 100% agreed, because if everyone thinks that the deep state's just going to go away, oh, we lost, let's get new careers, let's just forget all the stuff that we put together over the last 100+ years, all of our plans that probably started long, long ago, and we're just going to abandon them because this one guy comes along and wins a battle. 4 years later, they're not going to regroup. Of course they're regrouping. We have groups like the WEF and CFR and the Trilateral and all Bilderbergs, and they're not going away.
no, they're not.
They just change form, and they're going to come right back. They're not going anywhere.
Well, this
So
is why, and I want to just speak to something from a spiritual application for a minute here. There's a scripture that talks about that we battle not against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities and forces of darkness, right? And it is talking about that our battle, what we see often is not what we're actually fighting. These people, they're just people. They're misled. They are, in some cases, I think, possessed or oppressed or, led astray, given into their, their baser selves. And we got to remember that they are being influenced, without a doubt. They're being influenced, and if we only attack the people who are in charge, and I do believe we do need to, especially if they've committed crimes, I think we absolutely need to bring them to justice. But if we only attack the person, the man or the woman that is committing the crime, and we don't attack the spirit behind it, then they will be replaced by somebody else who will be influenced by that same demonic spirit. And that's why we have to attack it on both ends.
Spiritual whack-a-mole.
Yes. Yeah, spiritual whack-a-mole. I agree.
It's just going to pop somewhere else in another form.
Yeah.
But that's why they hate Jesus. And it doesn't matter. They will allow transgenders into the classroom. They will allow Muslims into the classroom. They will allow Buddhists into the classroom, Hindu. It doesn't matter, whatever it is. They will allow it into the classroom. The one thing they won't allow into the classroom is Jesus Christ, no matter what.
That's right.
It is the one thing that is hated and one thing that is detested, and they will stand up and fight hard. They will respect every religion, every culture, everything. But if you are a Christian, you're the one thing that's not going to get that respect. And it used to be that the left used to at least feign, act, pretend.
They pretended that they believed in morality, at least some level of morality. They don't. I mean, again, and it's really, really important. I cannot stress this enough. It is not about the people. Just because somebody's a Democrat or somebody's a leftist or somebody is a Marxist, that in and of itself, you have to remember, why are they that way? They're that way because they're being influenced by a demonic spirit, and that's really what it is. So we have to attack it on both fronts. We can't just go after the person and the political party. When Hillary Clinton was running for president, and I watched the Democrat convention, and I watched the opening prayer It was
Well, the
so,
and A women.
what's that?
Well, the guy said amen and the A women.
No, that was a different one. I'm
Okay.
talking about, that was the one with Biden. I'm talking about the one with Hillary Clinton going back a little ways. There was a woman pastor who led the prayer opening for the Democrat National Convention.
Right out the gate.
Well, her prayer was really to Hillary Clinton. It wasn't a prayer to God. It was demonic. And it was so clear to anybody that listened to that, and then listen to the prayer that opened the Republican convention, which was humble and was, about honoring God. The other one was about lifting up and elevating Hillary Clinton as their savior. It was clear to me the spirit that was behind both of those, and that's really what we've been fighting against. That's what this, and the problem is that many Christians, and even those that aren't Christians but have some modicum of faith, that believe that there is a higher power, that there is a good and an evil in this world. First of all, that's the first step, is recognizing that there is good and that there is evil, and that there is a force for good and there is a force for evil. If you don't recognize that, then there's no point in us even having a conversation, because then those people are completely deluded. But when you recognize that there is evil, that there is good, and that there is a force for evil and a force for good, and that they are at war with one another, and you recognize that you have a job to do as well, and part of that is being a light in this dark world. And one of the problems that I see going on right now is there's an awful lot of people, who call themselves Christian, who go to church on Sunday, who donate money to good causes, but when it comes down to engaging in their community, engaging in their school boards, engaging, in politics,
Or just taking
speaking to their
standing in.
neighbors and everybody else about what is truth and what is not truth, they are completely silent.
Yep.
They are lukewarm. And the scriptures are very clear about what God's opinion is. God would rather you be hot or cold, because at least there you stand.
When there are clear biblical principles that you're afraid to say out loud for fear of offending somebody, that's not Christian. A woman is not supposed to be a pastor. 2 Timothy, 1 Timothy talk about that in black and white. There's no misinterpreting what those books say. It's no misinterpreting what Corinthians 6:9 says. Nor adulterers, liars, fornicators, or homosexuals will inherit the kingdom of heaven. Either the entire Bible is true or the entire Bible is a lie. So you cannot just say, well, I don't want to say that, or there's more to it than that, or no. What it says, it means, and what it means, it says. And as a Christian, it's not you taking that stance when you quote a Bible verse. That's not you. That's God speaking through you. And so when I see people unwilling because of they think it's divisive to espouse certain verses or certain ideas that are a little too Christian because they just want to get along with everybody. I think you're a fake Christian. And that's what James Harrison was talking about the other day on the podcast. The biggest impediment to us pushing the natural family and the way things are supposed to be, the nuclear family and what the tried and true best practice for a civilization is and always has been, the biggest impediment to that is the church. Because when a pastor gets up to give a speech about homosexuality or LGBTQ or any of that kind of stuff, the very first thing he'll say is, before I start this sermon, I just want to let you know that I know many gay and lesbian people or whatever, and I think they're good people, and I think, and I love them. And then they just decapitate their entire sermon, and then it becomes powerless, everything they say after that. Now, if you put that in context and you say, well, it's not I love the person and not the sin, and this is a sin, and then you go on to preach, that is different from giving a pardon, before you go on to try to make it seem like you're preaching against something. The UMC church.
Well, I think it's critically important that we have to, as believers, we've got to recognize a separation between our judgment on those that are within the church. We absolutely have that right to make judgments on those that are claiming to be
Corinthians 5.
Those that are outside the church, and so, but on policy, and I on the issue of policy and what the government should be doing. I don't advocate a theocracy in our country, but I do believe that our government absolutely must support and uphold those things which are healthy, those things that fall under what they call natural law, right? You know,
A
and
societal standard that allows us to coexist.
in other words, and I'm not saying that we should have, that we should deprive some other American of having, of not being able to live the way they want, provided they're not impairing somebody else's, rights. But that does not mean that the government should be supporting it. Just like we know
marriage is a man and a woman, and if you want to have a civil union, which is a contract between two adults that says where you're going to leave your things and all of the same rights essentially that you get under marriage, I'm okay with that because I can't tell you what you can and can't do. It's not my job to be a dictator. We are a free country. Well, at the same time, you cannot call it marriage because the term marriage is spiritual, which means God joins two souls and blesses a union and makes two one. And God
and where our battle is as Christians is in the church, because that is where the pollution has made its way in. I remember being in, well, we've seen it. There's all these pastors these churches that hang these these transgender flags and stuff outside their churches.
Right around the corner.
Those are an abomination. I'm just going to call them what they are. They are an abomination.
This is the problem, Nate. This is the problem. I have a lot of Christian brothers and sisters that are around me, people that I do love and I'm close to in the faith. And I talk to these people all the time. And I bring this up all the time. And I'm like, it's right there. It's on Here, I'll even tell you. It's on Robindale in Green Valley Parkway. If you're ever in Vegas, UMC Church on Robindale and Green Valley Parkway. They ordain lesbians to teach Sunday school. And they tell you that the word homosexual is mistranslated in the Bible and that we're not to judge them. That's God's job. I went into the church and I confronted them on their theology straight to you can go back and look at the old podcast. It's there. And, they couldn't stand up to the scripture and they couldn't. And you're not supposed to judge. Well, Corinthians 5:12 says, I'm supposed to judge my brother, not the world. That's God's job. And as far as people being able to come into your church, they can, but you can't shut your door to anyone. However, they can't become members of your church and they can't be in a backslidden state or in a fallen state and serve, such as being pastors or whatnot. Yeah. And then,
I would argue that there is a biblical, it's a rare thing, but there is a biblical purpose or place, even for shunning certain people within the church. There's this scriptural example of the man who was sleeping with his father's wife.
Yeah.
And in that case, there's a very biblical prescription of how it should happen. You confront the person in private. You tell them that they need to repent from their ways. Then if they don't, then you go with another brother, in the church. And then if two have gone and and talked to that person, and they still don't, then the whole church comes together and says, "We're sorry, but we can't have you be a part of this. You cannot be a part of our group."
You get excommunicated. But do you think any church in America today, which I believe America has a version of Christianity?
Yeah.
Right. Go to Africa and in places where people actually practice Christianity for real. Yeah. Where the whole village is Christian and they go by Christian law. They don't sue each other. They take their legal problems to church, like the Bible tells us to. Like they live real.
My lawyer friends let you hear. Don't let them hear that. That'd be bad for business.
It's biblical. It's really biblical, and this is not what's practiced here. The church that I left was left because the pastor left the church to his daughter and she started preaching and I had a problem with it and I said something and she said, well, I got a book that explains it. I said, I do too. 1 Timothy and 2 Timothy, and you cannot misinterpret. It says that a woman is not to have authority over a man or to preach and teach. It literally says it. They are to learn and what? Silence.
Silence. Yeah.
They are to teach other women and children.
And that's the other thing too, is there's a place for them, in leadership, and that is with the other women and with younger women, older women teaching.
We are a role-based society, and this is why we call it cultural Marxism, and it's invaded the church, because now these churches that are coming forth, like the Lutherans and others that don't believe this, believe that we're being sexist because we're telling them what Scripture says, and yet they still call themselves Christians.
Yeah.
Sad.
Yeah. Well, we are in a fallen place, I think, as a country, as a people, and here's the thing. This is the beauty of the Holy Spirit. If people have the Holy Spirit, I believe they'll be guided to the truth, even without my help. And so I don't have to go and
you're gonna know it. That's for sure.
Yeah, and so I don't have to. One of the things I really truly believe is that there's a lot of wisdom and a lot of things that I know, but there are some people that are not ready or willing to receive it. But I know if they get the Holy Spirit, they're going to come to that conclusion too.
Paul talks about that. Paul talks about giving people baby milk before you give them meat, and that sort of thing. And so there's stages of growth that Christians go through, and
sure. So that brings up a good point. So let's just for real quickly, I just want to make mention of this. The way that we deal with baptism, for example, it's really not. We don't treat it the way that it was treated, I think, in the early church. The early church really saw baptism as kind of like it was like a initiation ceremony. It was a rite of initiation. It was a way of showing.
It was a marriage.
Yeah, it was a way of showing that you were submitting, to the doctrines of the church, and that you were becoming a Christian. Today, we don't really do that anymore, and so there's no studying and showing yourself approved. Churches have big programs and things that they've got to keep up and run, and not everybody's willing to help, and not everybody's willing to work, and so they take whoever they can, and oftentimes people end up getting promoted to positions before they've shown themselves to be approved, before they've really shown themselves to be worthy. And you end up with people who are serving, in some capacity within the church. And maybe it starts off innocent and, as they're just an usher, leading people to an open seat, or they're just somebody that's, welcoming traffic coming into the church.
I want to answer this real quick, because you just talked about this. We were just saying the same thing, Robert. And we agree with you. We do not want a theocracy at all. We just want a system that works, that has a societal standard, because anarchy is not American either. So there has to to Robert, I 100% agree with you. I think that the reason why I don't want a theocracy is because human beings are not perfect, and without a doubt, you're going to end up with people who are going to utilize power in ways that are not appropriate, ways that are ungodly. And so did I just say that out loud? The Pope.
Yeah. And so I think, and so this is kind of like the way I look at like discipleship, for example. I have a responsibility when the Lord puts me in a position to be an influence in somebody's life in a positive way, to be that. But I should never look at that person as somebody who needs to develop their relationship with me as a subservient person. That's not what it's about. I should be pointing them to Christ, and they should be developing their own relationship with God. I once heard a pastor once say, everyone needs to have their own philosophy of God. And I don't like the way that he said it, but I understand what he's saying. What he's talking about is that we all have to have our own personal connection with God, even our kids. My kids are grown now, but when they were growing up, of course, I wanted them.
Right? It's a perspective, but it doesn't differ from like who God is. It's just the thing bringing you to God.
I looked at it like this, and anybody that's been a parent will understand this. When you're raising your kids, you raise your kids with certain values, and you hope that when they move out, that they're going to continue in those values and they're going to continue to hold those values. And so if all you ever do is tell your kids what's right and what's wrong, if all you ever do is point scripture at them and bring them to church and indoctrinate them, then the moment they get out of your grasp and they're under somebody else's indoctrination, they are going to slip away. And that's what happens in college often. So the best thing that you can do is to foster in your kids their own personal relationship with God, their own personal connection to the Holy Spirit, because then what happens is they will begin to understand and become empowered in their relationship with God, so that when they are tested, which they surely will be, everyone, I believe, is going to get tested at some point.
Yeah, you don't want to put a bigger burden on them than they can in legalism, especially to a new Christian or someone coming up, can make Christianity seem like a prison.
Yeah.
And it's anything but.
But if you empower them with their own personal relationship with God, you teach them how to study the Bible so that they can do it. It's kind of like that: give a man a fish, you feed him for, feed him once, but teach a man how to fish and give him the tools, and then he feeds himself for a lifetime. In the same way, I'll give you a good example. I was in Japan, and I had a friend of mine who, for 3 years we lived there, and we developed a really good, close personal friendship, and he became a Christian before I left. But right before I left, and I was so worried because I wasn't there to even be able to disciple him. So I just prayed. I said, God, bring the right people into his life. Reveal yourself to him in ways that he will develop a close relationship with you. And I trust that, Lord, if you were good enough to lead me to you without the aid of really anybody else, I know you can lead him and direct him. And you know what ended up happening? I went out there and visited him about a year later, and he had an experience. He got into a car accident, and in Japan, a car accident that somebody gets injured, it's a pretty serious thing. Even if, it's not like here. If somebody gets injured and you're at fault, you're likely going to go to jail. And he had gotten tired. He was working long hours. He got really tired, and he ended up getting in an accident that caused some real, damage to this other person. And he ended up showing up in court, and he thought for sure his life was over. He thought he was going to end up in prison. And the guy, he was praying and praying and praying and begging God to save him. And he said that the guy that was basically that he had, gotten to the accident with and caused the physical damage to, pleaded with the judge to have mercy on him. And he found out the guy was a Christian, which is very rare in Japan. I mean, it's like 0.1%. And he said that it had a huge impact on him, and it drove him into his relationship with God like nothing that anybody could have said to him. And he ended up connecting with the church eventually, and becoming an avid studier of the Word of God, and became a very strong Christian as a result of this terrible tragedy that happened. But that's just it, is that God can work in our lives and can work in other people's lives and in our kids' lives. And so we have a responsibility to tell people the truth, but ultimately they need to find God, on their own terms. And they've got to have that connection. And that's where people are missing. And a lot of these churches that offer all these great programs, but they don't offer any personal connection with God, or they leave people dependent upon their, leadership of their pastor rather than on the leadership of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, you're basing a man instead of.
That's right.
Yeah.
And what happens is ultimately when that man falls, then they end up falling away, because they end up seeing this weak human being, who maybe committed adultery, or maybe has some other problem or whatever that fails them as a human being.
I'm going to play a clip on the way out of here, and you may have seen this clip before, you may not have, but this is the most Christian thing that I've ever seen. There's not another clip like it. I guarantee you, this young boy's brother was murdered by a police officer who accidentally entered the wrong apartment and thought she was in her own apartment and shot his brother dead. So he's obviously missing his brother, loves his brother, but this is what he did. And it brought everyone to tears. And this is the example of Christianity. And there's not many people in this situation that would react the same way. I promise you, this is powerful.
I don't want to say twice or for the 100th time what you've or how much you've taken from us. I think you know that. But I hope you go to God with all the guilt, all the bad things you may have done in the past. Each and every one of us may have done something that we're not supposed to do. If you truly are sorry, I know I can speak for myself. I forgive you. And I know if you go to God and ask Him, He will forgive you. And I don't think anyone could say it. Again, I'm speaking for myself, not even behalf of my family. But I love you just like anyone else. And I'm not gonna say I hope you rot and die just like my brother did, but I personally want the best for you. And I wasn't gonna ever say this in front of my family or anyone, but I don't even want you to go to jail. I want the best for you because I know that's exactly what both of them would want you to do. And the best would be give your life to Christ. I'm not gonna say anything else. I think giving your life to Christ would be the best thing that both of them would want you to do. Again, I love you as a person, and I don't wish anything bad on you. I don't know if this is possible, but can I give her a hug, please? Please?
Yes.
That's the cop who murdered his brother in court at her sentencing. That is what healing looks like. That is the antithesis to what BLM is. That heals, that builds, that's everything that we should be. BLM is chaos, tear down, just hate filled. That boy right there did something that is, you know how strong you have to be at the courtroom facing your brother's murderer and say what he said and then ask permission from the judge to give the person who took his brother's life a hug and want the best for her. and just ask her to go to Christ and ask the judge not to even send her to jail. It changed the trajectory of her life, because today that's exactly what she did. And she's out of jail now. And it's one of the most powerful clips I've ever seen in my whole life. You're muted.
Sorry about that. The thing is it didn't just benefit her. It benefited him as well. Because when you hold that kind of hatred in your heart for somebody, all it does is destroys you from the inside. I've seen that, and after I went through what I went through, where I had somebody that tried to destroy my life, my freedom, my family. I remember I went down to an event down in Tennessee, and I was by myself down there, and getting ready to campaign. So I went down there to go do a bunch of interviews with media. And while I was down there, I met up with a friend, and we had this conversation. And it came up about this FBI agent that had done these terrible things to me and my family. And I admitted I had a hard time forgiving this guy. I couldn't forgive him. I hated him. And and my friend called me on it and said, "You need to forgive him." And I did, and it broke me, but I did. I truly handed it over to God, and I forgave the man. And it was powerful, because I think holding that bitterness inside, it would have destroyed me.
It almost destroyed me. I spent 5 years in prison begging God to take it from me. I guarantee you that when I went in, I was only supposed to do a 1 to 3. Should have been out in 1.5. And believe me, I needed to do all 5. If I would have got out in 1.5, I wouldn't have been ready.
Mm-hmm.
I was too angry.
Yeah.
I was into some really bad things, and I was around some really bad folks. And life in the beginning stages of that whole thing, life didn't mean a whole lot to me. And, to be quite honest with you, at that stage of my life, what I was going through, I had so much hate in my heart. I had no empathy for anyone because of what I felt like I was needlessly put through, which was the prison sentence. So I had every intention of looking for that man who did those things to put me there. Every intention. I knew where he was, I knew his name. I had a Xerox copy of his license. And, after a while and being exposed to some of those Christians that were in that place, and let me tell you, folks, if you don't think there are Christians in prison, I put it to you that there are more real Christians in prison that maybe than on the out, because those people live under scrutiny of everyone looking at them all day long to call them hypocrites. They have to be Christians all the time, and they are firm on their commitment to Christ. And it was through, dealing with those types of brothers that I just started to see, man, this hate is killing me. The bitterness that was in me was killing me. The thing that was driving me, I was up to 1,000 push-ups a day. I'd lost a ton of weight, but hate was my fuel. I worked out 8 a.m, again at noon, and again before I went to bed. And it was all just envisioning in my head, just the hate. And that's how I got the energy to do those things, was I drew it from a place of hatred. And I was in a place full of serial killers and cartel members, and you name the bad element, it was there. And I was no better than them. I walked with them, talked with them, shared feelings with them, fought alongside of them. I didn't start in a maximum security prison. I ended up in one. So I'm not taking up for myself, but I tell you what, when somebody told me, they said, "Are you going to continue to do that thing, or are you going to follow Christ? Because you can't do both. What are you going to do?" I had to take my life into my own hands. I've told you this story, and go up to some really bad folks I mean, really bad folks, and tell them, and it could have been my life on the spot. I had to tell them, guys, I can't do this no more. I got to follow God, and I have no options here. So whatever has to happen, has to happen. I made it here. I've never backed down from the fight. Everything that I've followed every rule within this, thing that we do. So you can't say I'm doing it because I'm afraid, because I was never afraid. I'm doing this because this is a legitimate thing that I can't say no to. I know full well what coming here and telling you this could cost me, and yet here I am doing it. And they told me, plain and simple, you're not going anywhere. We're still in this room, and you're in that cell right there. You're not running anywhere. So if you're not legitimately this person, if you're not legitimately transforming your life, if you're not really handing it all to God, we'll see it. And it will cost you your life. And that's what I did from that day forward. And that's really, so when people think that, and that's part of the reason, I've been through the worst of it. You can't intimidate me. There's nothing you can do to me. There's nothing that I haven't been through. There's no fear that I haven't, became numb to. At this point, my life isn't my own, it's God's. That's what the PPN is about, the Patriots Prayer Network. It was a place to gather patriots under one umbrella of shared value system to talk about everyday issues through a Christian lens, unafraid of whatever may come of it. And every step of the way, God has met us and let us grow and opened up doors of opportunity. We're going to be broadcasting from CPAC. I'm on cloud 9 about that. How in the hell did I go from being a felon on a level 4 prison yard affiliated with the worst prison gang in the whole country to being 10 feet from President Trump and getting governor certificates, congressional certificates, to getting a 6-figure job, to getting my life back, to getting my family back, having more than I lost within a short amount of time, within 2 years of my release. From having nothing. I didn't even have my family when I walked out. All I did was what should have never worked. God said, go do this, go to this program and do this. And it's like, I did everything that even the people in the program told me I shouldn't do because of what God was leading me to do. And they said, listen, man, you just got out of prison. You should not be trying to get an executive job. You should be, shooting a little lower and work your way up to that. You just got out of prison. You got to have more opportunity because you only wanted this one job interview instead of we have to have you pick at least 20. You're only taking the one. And I'm like, because that's the one that God put on my heart to take. And they said, well, how much are you going to ask for it? And I gave them the 6-figure number. And they laughed at me. They actually laughed out loud. And when I came back 5 minutes later and said, I got the job, they didn't know how to react. They had no idea how to react. And I went into that company and I transformed the entire way they do, business. And I lit a fire under them. And I created a standard that permeates throughout the entire company. And I'm doing this. And, I've repaired relationships that, believe me, were unrepairable because they should not exist based on the things that happened. God gave me the ability to forgive instead of hate. And because Eddie didn't do any of it. And with all the phone ringing this way, to talk to people, how you and I hooked up, and the whole thing, it was not because of any of my efforts. It was not, I promise you. Even the thing with CPAC, I got a phone call that just came out of the blue. They said, you guys want to broadcast from CPAC? We didn't even pay for the table. Usually you got to pay for your seat on Radio Road. You got to get a sponsor. You got to go through all this. I didn't have to do any of it.
Yep.
So, the glory is God's. And that's why I unabashedly and I'm unafraid and I'm 100% uncompromising. Some people may call that intolerant, judgmental, call it what you will. But I've already learned through a lifetime of pain what happens when you compromise with the devil. You crack that door just a little bit, he's going to put the rest of his whole body through it. So I'm done with that. So, you know, that's my story. And that's why I'm saying when people call me a fake Christian, sometimes you get the trolls and that, and you guys, they have no idea what I risked to be the man that I am today. They have no, and in the same position, they wouldn't have done it. I promise you, they wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that we've got there's the biggest thing I think on this life, right? The one thing that God wants us to learn, I think, there's any truth that we learn is to be humble, because without Him, we're nothing. And
Exactly.
you know, but man, it's been an interesting night, and we're 2 hours and 35 minutes in, and I am quickly beginning to fade. So
I'm 6 hours online today, so 6-hour podcast today.
hey, same man. I had to do my pre-record for the talk radio show, so
It was funny. It was funny, Nate. When we started this, I started telling you I was having aches and whatnot in the legs and the lower extremity, and I was tired and I was under the weather a bit. I'm wide awake and I feel amazing right now, and my legs aren't even hurting anymore. It just something happens when you start. We just had church. We just had church. So.
You know, and I want to mention something that, you know, before we close down the show, we were going to talk about a couple other things we didn't get a chance to get to, and that's all right. One of those is what's going on in Syria right now. There's a lot of Christian brothers and sisters in Syria. In Aleppo, for example, there's over 20,000 Christians there that are wondering what's going to happen with this new, you know, government that they're going to end up with, because the rebels basically came in. Now, I am reading reports that there's an Islamic group that has HST, which is one of the groups that's part of the rebels, that even they are taking a very different stance than what people expected. They're being very gracious to Christians and other minority groups in these cities, and we need to pray for them and pray that you know, God will bless Syria and help bring peace there. Now that the other former dictator is gone, and you know, they need to get back to their lives and be able to, you know, have some semblance of peace there. And as a new government forms there, it's going to be critically important that, you know, it's formed in a democratic way that gives people representational government, so that they are so that they basically don't end up in another situation with some tin-pot dictator, you know, ruling over the people with an iron fist. So I want to just include them in our prayers tonight. And also South Korea, where my son is. South Korea's had a little bit of a struggle in the last week with their president declaring martial law. It was quickly put down by the legislature there.
Yeah, they voted against
Parliament. And but my son is stationed over there right now. In fact, today, right before the show, I got to watch him you know, be awarded.
Is he Air Force?
He's Army. And
yeah, Air Force base.
Yeah, we got quite a few bases over there, but he's Army's in 2ID satellite guy, and but he ended up getting he went through his BLC, which is a basic leadership course necessary to be able to promote to non-commissioned officer. And he ended up not only did he, you know, pass his BLC, but he made the commandant's list in the top, you know, 10% of the class, which was pretty awesome. And, you know, thanks to the advancements in technology, I was able to watch it all go down on a live stream right before you know, joining the show tonight. So it was pretty awesome. And so, you know, real gratitude and you know, to be able to see that, and I'm excited for him and very proud of him. So Jerry, if you end up seeing this, you know, just know your dad's proud of you, and I know you're doing great things out there.
No, it ain't no better word that can be spoken. I mean, as a son, I'm telling you, than to hear your dad say, "I'm proud of you." There's nothing in the world like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I miss my father terribly, but yeah, I did nothing to make him proud while he was alive. But now I hope that he's looking down and he feels that way, because that's exactly why I do it. It's for a multitude of reasons, but one is that's definitely one. So I just love hearing those words, man. I love to see a parent that has done what he's supposed to do, and the fruits of that labor as a child. That's a man. You made a man, and a
Yeah.
responsible.
I've been
one.
blessed to see my kids all grow up to turn into decent, honest, good citizens, and I've been real blessed in that, and that's 100% God. I remember during some of the times it was difficult it's difficult raising kids, and you make mistakes as a parent, and there are times you look and you go, man, how is it that my kids are doing this or doing that, and I'll never forget my mother-in-law telling me one time, well, hey, if God, being who he is, couldn't control Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, what makes you think you're going to be able to?
Oh wow, Grandma just had the good advice, because
that was so profound.
That was very profound, because I tell you what, boy, you can do everything right.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't matter. And then sometimes you can do everything wrong, and the kid still just gets it.
Yeah.
And it's a case of
Jerry, every kid is different. And Jerry was he was the one that needed regular beatings. He didn't think he was loved unless he was getting his butt whooped. But
one of the things to say that's not a good thing, right?
But I got other kids that if I even gave a cross word to them, man, they felt like I didn't love them. So every child is different.
I don't have to beat my kids. Like, I'm so happy for you that you don't have to put a hand on your kids and they work out just fine for you. That's great. Awesome. I have to beat mine daily. No, I grew up, I was a terrible kid, man. I was a terrible kid. And, my mother used to, and I don't blame her for it. My God, some of the things I did as 10 years old were felonies. So, I mean, she did what she was supposed to do. So I don't blame her a bit. And spare the rod, spoil the child, right? So it eventually had an effect. Her prayers and time correcting me and that advice eventually sunk in. So it is what it is. Guys, but thank you so much for, this conversation went all over the place, but it was amazing. I had a great time. It put me in a great mood, and I'm ready for the rest of this night. And what I'm ready for is probably to go eat something. So and get ready for the next week, which is going to be hard to push before the Christmas holiday. And there's a lot of people trying to get things done. So there's a lot of work to be done in a very short period of time. So
right as I was coming downstairs, my wife was pulling some peanut butter cookies that she had just baked out of the oven. And hopefully there's some left. Knowing my family, they're probably all gone, but hopefully they save me.
The cool thing is it's me and my wife. So whatever she bakes in there, I don't have to share.
Well, it was just me and my wife, but then I had two of my kids that were boomerangs. I threw them out and they came back. So
we got one that we're sure that's going to happen to, but we had to give her that little life lesson. You want your freedom, you think that this isn't enough help for you, go find out. You'll be back. So she'll be back. It's all right. We know where she's at. She's safe. You got to learn, man. You got to learn. Sometimes the only way you got to learn is do. But guys, thanks so much for tuning in. And as usual, the silent majority, you have to stop being silent and stand your ground. Evil will never retreat willingly. It must be beaten back in every instance. Guys, thank you for tuning in to the Woke Detox podcast. Nate, do you have anything you want to say before we get out of here?
I've said everything I need to say.
There it is, guys. Good night and Merry Christmas, not Happy Holidays. See you later.
small town we're free.
This is the Patriots Prayer. This is Bryson Gray, and you are watching the Patriots Prayer.
On the Patriots Prayer Network. Thank you all.
Can the chains that try to bound. Out on the fields where hard work's done, they fight the fight till the work's well won. No more silence in the heartland's call. Stand up strong, let the weak ones fall. The detox starts with Eddie and Nate, battling lies, exposing hate. Woke ideologies crumble and fade when real men step into the parade. Clear eyes and an iron will, they take on tides that others fear still. Voices of the field, the farm, the street. Two men stand and won't accept defeat. Against the storm of cancel waves, they light the fire, legends and braves. In a world trying to dim the flame, they keep it burning, they make a name. The detox starts with Eddie and Nate, battling lies, exposing hate. Woke ideologies crumble and fade when real men step into the parade.